The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete training ground at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her tactical vest one final time, checking each piece of equipment with the precision of someone who had done this countless times before. At 28, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from years of proving herself in a world that constantly questioned her presence. Today was different, though. Today, 300 and one of the Navy's most elite warriors would be watching her every move, waiting for her to fail. The whispers had already started weeks ago when her assignment was announced. A woman, they said, had no business being here. They didn't know who she really was, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Commander Jake Harrison stood at the edge of the training area, his weathered face showing no emotion as he watched Sarah prepare. He had been running these exercises for over a decade, and he had seen countless soldiers come and go. Some rose to the challenge, others crumbled under pressure. But something about this assignment felt different. The orders had come from the very top, with strict instructions that Sarah Mitchell was to be treated like any other trainee. No special consideration, no reduced expectations. "You sure about this, Commander?" asked Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Harrison's second-in-command. "The boys are already talking. They think this is some kind of political stunt." Harrison's jaw tightened slightly. The boys need to focus on their own performance and stop worrying about others. Mitchell earned her spot here just like everyone else. But even Harrison didn't know the full truth about Sarah Mitchell. Her official record showed an impressive but standard military career. Infantry training, followed by specialized combat roles, multiple deployments overseas, commendations for bravery. What it didn't show was the classified missions, the years spent in deep cover operations, or the fact that she had been handpicked for a program so secret that only a handful of people in the entire military knew it existed. The training exercise scheduled for today was known as the Gauntlet, a brutal combination of physical endurance, tactical thinking, and combat skills that pushed even experienced SEALs to their limits. It was designed to identify weaknesses and break down soldiers mentally and physically. Most participants barely survived it once. Sarah would be attempting it while being actively sabotaged by people who wanted her to fail. 3 days earlier, Sarah had overheard a conversation that wasn't meant for her ears. She was returning equipment to the armory when she heard voices from the adjacent storage room. Through the thin walls, she could make out the unmistakable voice of Petty Officer First Class Tony Rodriguez, one of the most vocal critics of her presence at the base. "Look, all I'm saying is that this whole thing is a joke," Rodriguez was saying. "She doesn't belong here, and we all know it. The Gauntlet will show everyone what we already know." Another voice, which Sarah recognized as belonging to Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan, responded. "Maybe she needs a little extra motivation to understand that." "What are you thinking?" Rodriguez asked. "Nothing dramatic. Just a few modifications to her equipment. Maybe her compass doesn't work quite right. Maybe her radio has some interference. Small things that could happen to anyone in the field." Sarah's blood ran cold. They weren't just hoping she would fail naturally. They were planning to sabotage her. She stayed perfectly still, listening as they discussed details of their plan. They would tamper with her navigation equipment, introduce static into her communications, and potentially even alter the timing mechanisms on some of the obstacle course elements. It was subtle enough to look like equipment failure, but comprehensive enough to guarantee her failure. As she listened, Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was exactly the kind of situation she had trained for her entire adult life. People underestimating her, trying to set her up for failure, assuming she would crumble under pressure. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The night before the exercise, Sarah made her own preparations. Using skills learned in years of covert operations, she carefully examined every piece of equipment she would be using. She found the modifications exactly where she expected them. The compass had been subtly altered to point several degrees off true north. Her radio had a small device attached that would create interference on key frequencies. Even her climbing rope had been weakened at specific stress points. Instead of reporting the sabotage, Sarah made a different choice. She documented everything with her phone, taking careful photos of each modification. Then, she made her own adjustments. She replaced the tampered equipment with backup gear from her personal kit, equipment that had been with her through multiple combat zones and had never failed her. But that wasn't enough. If Rodriguez, Sullivan, and whoever else was involved in this scheme thought they could intimidate her into quitting, they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. Sarah began planning her own form of psychological warfare. The morning of the exercise arrived with typical California coastal weather. Fog hung low over the training ground, creating an almost mystical atmosphere that seemed fitting for what was about to unfold. As Sarah walked toward the starting area, she could feel hundreds of eyes on her. Some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. The gauntlet consisted of 5 phases, each designed to test different aspects of military capability. The first phase was pure physical endurance, a 3-mile run through sand dunes carrying 60 pounds of equipment. The second phase tested marksmanship under stress, requiring participants to engage multiple targets while navigating obstacles. Phase 3 was a water survival challenge, simulating escape and evasion in hostile territory. The fourth phase tested tactical thinking through a complex urban warfare scenario. The final phase was hand-to-hand combat against multiple opponents. Most participants who made it through all 5 phases were completely exhausted and barely coherent. The record completion time was 2 hours and 17 minutes, set by a SEAL who later became a member of DevGRU, the Navy's most elite special operations unit. Commander Harrison called the assembled SEALs to attention. Today's exercise will proceed exactly as outlined in your briefings. Mitchell will attempt the gauntlet under standard conditions. Any interference with her performance or equipment will result in immediate disciplinary action. His words were met with nods and murmurs of acknowledgement, but Sarah could see the skeptical looks that passed between certain groups of men. Rodriguez and Sullivan stood with a cluster of their supporters, their expressions showing barely concealed anticipation. They thought they knew how this would end. "Mitchell," Harrison called. "You ready?" Sarah stepped forward, her expression calm and focused. "Ready, sir. Remember, this isn't about proving anything to anyone else. This is about proving something to yourself. You understand?" "Understood, sir." But as Sarah took her position at the starting line, she knew this was about much more than personal achievement. This was about sending a message to every person who thought they could intimidate her, manipulate her, or force her out through underhanded tactics. They wanted to see her fail. Instead, they were about to witness something they would never forget. The starting horn sounded, and Sarah took off at a measured pace toward the sand dunes. Behind her, the crowd of SEALs moved to various observation points along the course. Most expected to see her struggle, fall behind, and eventually quit somewhere in the middle phases. Rodriguez and Sullivan positioned themselves where they could watch her equipment fail at the crucial moments they had planned. What none of them knew was that Sarah Mitchell had spent the last 3 years working with a classified military program designed to create the ultimate special operations soldier. She had undergone training that made SEAL preparation look like basic fitness class. Her body had been conditioned to operate at levels that most people couldn't even imagine, and her mind had been trained to function with crystal clarity under the most extreme stress. As she crested the first sand dune, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The real show was just beginning, and she had some very important lessons to teach. By the time this day was over, everyone watching would understand that they had chosen the wrong woman to mess with. The first phase of the gauntlet was designed to weed out anyone who wasn't in peak physical condition. The sand dunes created an unstable running surface that quickly exhausted the leg muscles, while the 60-pound pack tested core strength and endurance. Most participants settled into a survival pace early on, knowing they needed to conserve energy for the challenges ahead. Sarah had no intention of conserving energy. She attacked the dunes with a pace that caused murmurs of surprise from the observers. Her stride was smooth and efficient, showing no signs of strain as she navigated the shifting sand. By the time she reached the halfway point of the run, she had opened up a significant lead over the expected pace. Rodriguez watched through binoculars, his confidence starting to waver. "She's moving too fast," he muttered to Sullivan. "She'll burn out before phase 2. But Sarah didn't burn out. If anything, she seemed to be getting stronger as the run progressed. Her breathing remained controlled, her form perfect, her pace unwavering. When she crossed into phase 2, she was nearly 10 minutes ahead of the course record. The marksmanship phase took place in a complex obstacle course filled with pop-up targets, moving platforms, and distractions designed to throw off concentration. Participants had to engage targets with both rifle and pistol while navigating physical challenges. This was where Rodriguez and Sullivan expected their sabotaged equipment to have the most impact. Sarah approached the shooting station and picked up her assigned rifle. She went through the standard equipment check, pretending not to notice the small device attached to her scope that would throw off her targeting. With practiced efficiency, she appeared to make minor adjustments to the scope while actually disconnecting and removing the sabotage device. Her movements were so smooth and natural that even the nearby range officers didn't notice what she was doing. The first target appeared, and Sarah's response was instantaneous. The rifle cracked, and the target dropped. She moved to the next position, engaging targets while climbing over barriers, crawling under obstacles, and maintaining perfect accuracy throughout. Her shooting was so precise and efficient that even the most skeptical observers began to take notice. "Jesus," whispered one of the SEALs watching. "Look at that grouping." Sarah's targets weren't just being hit, they were being destroyed. Every shot was finding the exact center of the target, creating tight groupings that demonstrated a level of marksmanship that exceeded even elite military standards. She moved through the course like a machine, her transitions between targets so smooth they seemed choreographed. When she reached the final shooting position, Sarah paused for just a moment. She looked directly at where Rodriguez and Sullivan were standing, made eye contact with both of them, and smiled. Then, she turned back to her target and put 5 rounds through the exact same hole, creating what appeared to be a single, perfectly centered shot. The range fell silent. Even the instructors were staring in amazement. Sarah calmly cleared her weapon, returned it to the rack, and moved toward Phase 3 without a word. Behind her, she left a group of increasingly nervous saboteurs and a growing number of impressed spectators. Phase 3 was the Water Survival Challenge, taking place in a large pool complex that simulated various maritime scenarios. Participants had to swim underwater for extended distances while carrying equipment, retrieve objects from the bottom of deep pools, and demonstrate various survival techniques. This phase typically eliminated more participants than any other, as it combined physical demands with the psychological stress of potential drowning. Sarah entered the water with the same calm confidence she had shown throughout the previous phases. The first challenge required swimming 50 meters underwater while wearing full gear. Most participants struggled to make it halfway before surfacing for air. Sarah glided through the water with the efficiency of someone who was equally comfortable above or below the surface. She completed the underwater swim without surfacing once, emerging at the target point with controlled breathing and no signs of distress. The pool observers exchanged glances. This was supposed to be the hardest part of the entire challenge for most people, and she had made it look effortless. The subsequent water challenges included retrieving weighted objects from the bottom of a 15-foot pool, treading water for 10 minutes while holding weights above her head, and navigating an underwater obstacle course in near-zero visibility conditions. Sarah moved through each challenge with mechanical precision, her performance so far above the expected baseline that the instructors began consulting among themselves about whether their scoring system was adequate. By the time she emerged from the final water challenge, word was spreading throughout the base about what was happening at the gauntlet. Personnel who weren't scheduled to observe were finding excuses to walk past the training area. The crowd of spectators had grown from the original 301 SEALs to include officers, support staff, and anyone else who could get away from their duties. Commander Harrison found himself in the unusual position of having to control crowds rather than worry about a struggling participant. "Everyone stays back from the course perimeter," he announced. "This is still an active training exercise." But even Harrison was struggling to maintain his professional demeanor. In over a decade of running these exercises, he had never seen anything like what Sarah Mitchell was demonstrating. Her performance wasn't just exceptional, it was redefining what they thought was possible. As Sarah prepared for Phase 4, the urban warfare simulation, Rodriguez and Sullivan were having an increasingly frantic conversation. Their sabotage had completely failed to have any effect, and Sarah's performance was making them look foolish for ever thinking they could intimidate her. "Maybe we should just call it off," Sullivan suggested. "Cut our losses and hope she doesn't realize what we tried to do." Rodriguez shook his head. "It's too late for that. We're committed now. Besides, The urban phase is the most complex. There's still a chance she'll make a mistake. What Rodriguez didn't understand was that mistake-making wasn't something Sarah Mitchell did anymore. Years of training and real-world operations had burned that possibility out of her. She approached every situation with multiple backup plans and the skills to execute any of them flawlessly. The urban warfare simulation was a complex facility designed to replicate city fighting conditions. Participants had to navigate through buildings, clear rooms of threats, rescue hostages, and complete various tactical objectives while being actively opposed by skilled instructors playing enemy roles. It was designed to test decision-making under pressure, tactical awareness, and the ability to adapt to rapidly changing situations. Sarah entered the simulation area and immediately began demonstrating why she had been selected for her classified program. She moved through the urban environment with a level of tactical sophistication that surprised even the instructors. Her room clearing was textbook perfect, her situational awareness was comprehensive, and her decision-making was both quick and intelligent. More than that, she began to show creativity and innovation that went beyond standard training. When faced with a scenario that typically forced participants into a difficult choice between speed and caution, Sarah found a third option that no one had considered before. She used the environment itself as a weapon, turning the simulation's own complexity against the opposition. The instructors playing enemy roles found themselves completely outmaneuvered by tactics they had never encountered. Sarah wasn't just completing the objectives, she was rewriting the rules of engagement in real time. Every scenario that was supposed to create stress and confusion became an opportunity for her to demonstrate another level of capability. By the time she completed the urban phase, the entire crowd had fallen into an almost reverent silence. What they were witnessing wasn't just exceptional military performance, it was artistry. Sarah Mitchell was turning warfare into a form of expression, and her message was becoming crystal clear to everyone watching. As she prepared for the final phase, hand-to-hand combat, Sarah finally allowed herself to look directly at the crowd of observers. Her eyes found Rodriguez and Sullivan immediately, and this time her smile carried a very different message. The setup had failed, the sabotage had backfired, and now it was time for the real lesson to begin. The final phase was about to show everyone exactly what happened when you chose the wrong woman to mess with. The hand-to-hand combat phase of the gauntlet was designed to break even the strongest participants. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about fighting while already exhausted, against fresh opponents, using techniques that tested every aspect of military close combat training. Most participants who made it this far were running on pure willpower, their bodies pushed far beyond normal limits. Sarah stood in the center of the combat ring, her breathing still controlled, her posture relaxed but ready. She showed no signs of fatigue from the previous 4 phases. If anything, she seemed to be gaining energy as the challenges progressed. The crowd of observers had grown to nearly the entire base population, with personnel finding any excuse to witness what was becoming a legendary performance. Commander Harrison consulted with the combat instructors. The standard protocol called for 3 rounds of hand-to-hand combat against progressively more skilled opponents. The first opponent would be a standard infantry soldier, the second would be someone with advanced combat training, and the third would be selected from the base's most elite fighters. Given Sarah's performance so far, Harrison was beginning to think they might need to modify their approach. "Sir," said Master Chief Petty Officer David Stone, the base's senior combat instructor, "given what we've seen today, I think we need to consider increasing the challenge level. Standard protocol might not be sufficient." Harrison nodded grimly. "What do you recommend?" "Let her fight all 3 opponents simultaneously. If she's as good as she appears to be, she should be able to handle it. If not, we'll find out quickly." The announcement of the modified rules sent a ripple of excitement through the crowd. Fighting 3 opponents at once was something that existed more in movies than reality. Even the most skilled fighters rarely attempted such odds, and never after completing 4 grueling phases of the gauntlet. Sarah's response to the announcement was a simple nod. No protest, no request for clarification, no signs of concern. She began stretching and loosening up her muscles with the calm professionalism of someone preparing for a routine training exercise. Rodriguez and Sullivan watched from the edge of the crowd, their confidence long since evaporated. What had started as a plan to humiliate Sarah Mitchell had turned into a demonstration of capabilities that neither of them had imagined possible. But they still held out hope that the combat phase might reveal some weakness, some limitation that would validate their original assumptions. The three opponents selected to face Sarah represented different fighting styles and skill levels. Corporal James Wright was a boxer with an impressive amateur record before joining the military. Sergeant First Class Luis Hernandez was a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who had won several military tournaments. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson was a former Marine who specialized in Krav Maga and had combat experience from multiple deployments. Individually, any one of these men would present a serious challenge to even experienced fighters. Together, they represented what most experts would consider impossible odds for a single opponent, especially one who had already completed 4 phases of the most demanding military exercise in existence. As the three men took their positions around the combat ring, Sarah moved to the center with fluid grace. She had shed her tactical vest and excess gear, revealing a physique that combined functional strength with obvious athleticism. But it wasn't her physical appearance that impressed the observers. It was the way she carried herself, the absolute confidence that radiated from every movement. Master Chief Stone called the fighters to attention. Standard combat rules apply. No strikes to vital areas, no weapons, submission, or incapacitation ends the round. This continues until either Mitchell is defeated or all three opponents are neutralized. Everyone understand. The 4 fighters nodded their acknowledgement. Sarah took a position in the center of the ring, turning slowly to keep all 3 opponents in her field of vision. Her stance was relaxed but balanced, her hands loose at her sides. To inexperienced observers, she might have looked unprepared. To those who understood combat, she looked like a coiled spring ready to explode into action. The starting signal came, and all 3 men moved simultaneously, trying to overwhelm Sarah through coordinated attack from multiple angles. It was a smart strategy that should have worked against almost any opponent. Instead, it became the opening moment of a combat demonstration that would be talked about for years to come. Sarah's response was instantaneous and perfectly calculated. As Wright approached from the front with a boxing combination, she stepped into his attack, deflecting his punches while using his momentum to throw him directly into Hernandez's path. The 2 men collided and stumbled, giving Sarah the split second she needed to deal with Thompson's attack from her left side. Thompson's Krav Maga training had taught him to attack aggressively and continuously, pressing his advantage through superior aggression. He launched a series of strikes designed to overwhelm and incapacitate quickly. Sarah met his attack with a defensive style that seemed to absorb and redirect his energy rather than directly opposing it. Every punch and kick he threw was turned aside with minimal effort, while Sarah gradually maneuvered him into position for her counterattack. What happened next defied everything the observers thought they knew about combat physics. Sarah seemed to flow like water around Thompson's strikes, then, suddenly, became solid as steel as she launched her own attack. A single perfectly timed combination sent Thompson to the ground, not unconscious, but completely controlled and unable to continue fighting. Wright and Hernandez had recovered from their collision and were approaching again, this time more cautiously. They had seen what happened to Thompson and realized they were dealing with someone far beyond their experience level. But military training and pride demanded they continue the fight. Hernandez, with his grappling background, attempted to take the fight to the ground where his Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills would provide an advantage. It was a logical strategy that had served him well in numerous competitions. Against Sarah, it became a textbook demonstration of why ground fighting requires absolute technical superiority when facing a skilled opponent. As Hernandez shot in for a takedown, Sarah's response was so fluid it seemed choreographed. She used his forward momentum against him, redirecting his energy while simultaneously positioning herself for a submission hold that left Hernandez completely immobilized. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds and ended with Hernandez tapping out before he fully understood what had happened to him. Wright was now alone, facing an opponent who had just dismantled 2 skilled fighters with an ease that bordered on the supernatural. His boxing training had taught him to be aggressive, to press forward and overwhelm opponents with superior hand speed and power. But, as he looked at Sarah's calm expression and relaxed stance, he began to realize that everything he thought he knew about fighting might be inadequate. The crowd had fallen completely silent. What they were witnessing went far beyond impressive military performance. This was mastery at a level that most of them had never seen before. Sarah wasn't just winning these fights. She was demonstrating a complete understanding of combat that transformed violence into art. Wright circled carefully, looking for an opening, trying to find some weakness in Sarah's defense. She turned with him, maintaining distance and positioning, her expression showing patience and professional interest. She wasn't in a hurry to end the fight. She was using the opportunity to study her opponent and demonstrate different aspects of her skill set. When Wright finally committed to his attack, launching a combination that represented his best technical abilities, Sarah's response revealed the true depth of her training. She didn't just defend against his strikes. She anticipated them, moving to counter his attacks before he had fully committed to them. The result was a dismantling of his offensive capabilities that left Wright completely off balance and vulnerable. Sarah's finishing combination was a masterpiece of controlled violence. Every strike was perfectly placed, designed to neutralize Wright's ability to continue fighting without causing permanent injury. When he hit the ground, he was conscious and aware, but completely unable to mount any further resistance. The three opponents lay on the combat mat, not seriously injured, but thoroughly defeated. Sarah stood in the center of the ring, her breathing only slightly elevated, showing no signs of distress or fatigue. She had faced three skilled fighters simultaneously and made it look like a training demonstration rather than a serious combat situation. The silence that followed was profound. More than 300 of the world's most elite warriors had just witnessed something that challenged their understanding of what was humanly possible. Many of them had spent years training to reach levels of capability that Sarah had just demonstrated casual superiority over. Master Chief Stone stepped into the ring, his expression showing a mixture of professional admiration and personal bewilderment. "Time," he announced, though the words seemed inadequate to describe what had just concluded. "Winner, by technical superiority, Mitchell." Commander Harrison approached the ring, his mind racing as he tried to process what he had just witnessed. He had been running military exercises for over a decade, had worked with some of the most elite soldiers in the world, but Sarah Mitchell's performance was unlike anything in his experience. This wasn't just exceptional military capability. This was something beyond normal military training. As Sarah helped her opponents to their feet, showing the same professional courtesy that any good soldier would demonstrate, Harrison began to suspect that there was much more to her background than her official record indicated. The level of skill she had just demonstrated required years of training beyond what any standard military program could provide. Rodriguez and Sullivan stood at the edge of the crowd, their faces showing a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and growing concern. Their plan to expose Sarah as unqualified had backfired spectacularly. Instead of demonstrating her weaknesses, they had arranged for her to showcase capabilities that made their own skills look amateur by comparison. But Sarah wasn't finished. As she walked toward the edge of the combat ring, she made a point of passing directly by where Rodriguez and Sullivan were standing. She stopped in front of them, her expression calm but unmistakably focused. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the silence that still filled the area. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Rodriguez felt his blood turn cold. "I don't know what you mean." Sarah's smile was patient but predatory. "I think you do. The equipment modifications you made. The sabotage devices. I documented everything before I replaced them with functional gear." Sullivan stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You can't prove anything." Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it toward them. The high-resolution photos showed the modified compass, the radio interference device, and the weakened climbing rope in perfect detail. Each image was time-stamped and geotagged, providing undeniable proof of the sabotage attempt. "These photos were taken at 2300 hours yesterday," Sarah said conversationally, "before I replaced your modifications with functional equipment. I also documented the serial numbers of all the devices and traced their origins. Would you like to guess which supply locker they came from?" The color drained from Rodriguez's face. Supply room access was logged and tracked. If Sarah had the serial numbers, she could prove exactly who had checked out the devices and when. Their sabotage plan hadn't just failed. It had created a trail of evidence that could end their military careers. "What do you want?" Sullivan asked quietly. Sarah's expression didn't change. "I want you to understand exactly who you try to mess with. And I want you to make sure this never happens again to anyone else." She turned to address the crowd of observers, her voice carrying clearly across the training area. "Ladies and gentlemen, what happened here today wasn't just about completing an exercise. It was about demonstrating that assumptions based on gender, appearance, or prejudice are not just wrong. They can be dangerous." The crowd listened in complete silence, hanging on every word. Sarah's performance had earned her their absolute attention and respect. "Some people thought they could intimidate me, manipulate me, or force me to quit through sabotage and harassment," she continued. "They made the mistake of thinking that I was just another soldier who could be bullied into submission. They were wrong." Sarah gestured toward Rodriguez and Sullivan, who were now the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. "These two gentlemen attempted to sabotage my equipment last night. They modified my compass, interfered with my radio, and weakened my climbing rope. They thought they could make me fail and then claim it was due to equipment malfunction." A murmur of anger ran through the crowd of SEALs. Military brotherhood was sacred, and deliberate sabotage of a fellow service member's equipment was one of the most serious breaches of trust possible. Rodriguez and Sullivan found themselves facing not just exposure, but the collective anger of their peers. "However," Sarah continued, "I want everyone here to understand that this kind of behavior isn't just wrong, it's counterproductive. Every minute these two men spent planning sabotage was a minute they could have spent improving their own capabilities. Every bit of energy they put into trying to make me fail was energy they could have used to make themselves better." She turned back to Rodriguez and Sullivan, her expression showing something that might have been pity. "You wanted to prove I didn't belong here. Instead, you've proven that you don't understand what belonging here really means." Commander Harrison stepped forward, his expression grim. "Rodriguez, Sullivan, you will report to my office immediately following this exercise. We will be having a very long conversation about your futures in this command." As Harrison spoke, Sarah noticed something else happening in the crowd. The initial shock and amazement at her performance was giving way to something more profound. The SEALs around her weren't just impressed by her capabilities. They were beginning to understand the larger implications of what they had witnessed. She had demonstrated that their assumptions about human limitations might be wrong, that training and dedication could produce capabilities that exceeded their previous understanding, that the person standing next to you might be capable of things that would redefine your entire worldview. More importantly, she had shown them that character and integrity were just as important as physical or technical skills. Her handling of the sabotage situation had been both professional and devastating. She had exposed wrongdoing while taking the high road, demonstrating leadership qualities that went far beyond military rank or position. As the crowd began to disperse, individual SEALs approached Sarah to offer congratulations and express their admiration for her performance. These weren't patronizing gestures or attempts to curry favor. These were genuine expressions of respect from professionals who recognized exceptional capability when they saw it. Master Chief Stone was among the first to approach. "Ma'am, in 25 years of military service, I've never seen anything like what you just demonstrated. Whatever program trained you, I hope they're planning to train more people like you." Sarah's response was characteristically modest. "Thank you, Master Chief. But remember, this wasn't about me proving I'm better than anyone else. This was about proving that assumptions and prejudices can blind us to reality. Everyone here has the potential for exceptional performance if they're willing to put in the work." But even as she spoke those words, Sarah knew they weren't entirely true. Her capabilities came from more than just hard work and dedication. She was the product of a program that pushed human potential far beyond normal limits, using techniques and technologies that most people couldn't imagine. The question now was whether her demonstration would lead to questions that she wasn't authorized to answer. As the afternoon sun began to cast longer shadows across the training ground, Sarah realized that her plan to teach a lesson about underestimating people had succeeded beyond her expectations. But She also realized that her cover as a standard military operator had been completely blown. Anyone with intelligence training would recognize that her capabilities came from sources far beyond normal military instruction. The game was about to change, and she wasn't sure yet whether that change would work in her favor or create new problems she would have to solve. What she did know was that Rodriguez, Sullivan, and anyone else who thought they could intimidate her had learned a lesson they would never forget. The wrong woman had been chosen, and the consequences were just beginning to unfold. The following morning brought an unusual quietness to the Naval Special Warfare Command base. Word of Sarah Mitchell's performance had spread throughout the entire military community, creating ripple effects that reached far beyond the original group of observers. Phone calls were being made to Washington, reports were being filed, and questions were being asked that made certain people in very high places extremely uncomfortable. Sarah sat in her temporary quarters, reviewing encrypted communications on a specially modified tablet that appeared to be standard military equipment. The messages were brief but clear. Her demonstration had attracted attention from intelligence agencies, foreign military attaches, and congressional oversight committees. Her cover as a standard military operator was completely blown, and now damage control was required. A soft knock at her door interrupted her reading. She opened it to find Commander Harrison standing in the hallway, his expression unreadable. Behind him was a man in civilian clothes who carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of senior intelligence personnel. "Mitchell," Harrison said formally. "This is Deputy Director Crawford from the Defense Intelligence Agency. He'd like to have a conversation with you." Crawford stepped forward, extending his hand. "Ms. Mitchell, or should I say Captain Mitchell? Your actual rank seems to be somewhat classified." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and assessing gaze of someone trained to evaluate people quickly and thoroughly. "Sarah's fine, sir. Would you like to come in?" Crawford nodded and entered her quarters, followed by Harrison. Once the door was closed, Crawford's demeanor became more relaxed but also more serious. "Sarah, we have a problem. Yesterday's demonstration was supposed to be a low-key training exercise. Instead, it became a viral video that's being analyzed by every intelligence service in the world." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Viral video?" Harrison looked uncomfortable. One of the SEALs was recording on his phone, posted it to social media last night before anyone realized what was happening. It's been viewed over 2 million times already, and the comments section is full of speculation about who you really are and what kind of training could produce those capabilities. Crawford pulled out his own tablet and showed Sarah the video. The footage was remarkably clear, showing her complete domination of the hand-to-hand combat phase and her subsequent exposure of the sabotage plot. The comments ranged from amazement to conspiracy theories about secret government supersoldier programs. "The good news," Crawford continued, "is that most people assume it's fake. The performance was so far above normal human capabilities that the general public is treating it as entertainment rather than documentary evidence. The bad news is that professional intelligence analysts know real capability when they see it." Sarah studied the tablet screen, watching her own performance with the detached interest of a professional reviewing operational footage. What kind of interest are we talking about? Russian military intelligence has submitted formal requests for information about our training programs. Chinese operatives have been asking questions about you specifically through back channels. Even our allies are wondering what we've been keeping from them. Crawford paused. "Your cover identity is completely compromised. We need to extract you from this assignment and create a new legend." But Sarah had other ideas. "Or we could use this opportunity to send a different message." Harrison and Crawford exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" Crawford asked. Sarah set down the tablet and moved to the window, looking out at the training ground where yesterday's events had unfolded. Everyone assumes that exceptional capability must come from some secret technology or classified program. What if we told them the truth instead? Crawford looked skeptical. "The truth about Project Prometheus is classified at the highest levels. We can't just—" "Not that truth," Sarah interrupted. "The truth about human potential. The truth about what's possible when you combine proper training with absolute dedication. The truth about what happens when you stop accepting limitations that aren't real." She turned back to face them, her expression intense, but controlled. "What if instead of hiding my capabilities, We use them to inspire people to push beyond what they think is possible. What if we showed the world that the real secret isn't technology or drugs or genetic modification? It's refusing to accept artificial limitations. Harrison was beginning to understand her thinking. You're talking about turning this into a recruitment and training opportunity rather than a security breach. Exactly. Every military in the world is going to want to know how to create soldiers like me. Instead of trying to convince them I'm fake or that my abilities came from classified technology, we show them the training methods. We demonstrate that exceptional capability comes from exceptional commitment. Crawford shook his head. Sarah, you're talking about revealing training techniques that took decades to develop. Methods that give us a strategic advantage over our adversaries. I'm talking about revealing training techniques that could make every soldier in every army better at their job. Think about the strategic implications of that. Sarah moved to a map on the wall, pointing to various international hotspots. How many conflicts could be resolved more quickly and with fewer casualties if soldiers on all sides were better trained? How many lives could be saved if we raised the overall level of military professionalism worldwide? It was a radical concept that went against decades of military thinking about operational security and strategic advantage. But as Crawford considered the implications, he began to see the potential benefits. Military conflicts often escalated due to poor training and professional incompetence. If Sarah's training methods could be adapted and shared, it might actually improve global stability. There's another factor to consider, Sarah continued. The video has already created a phenomenon. People are inspired by what they saw. They're talking about pushing themselves harder, training more seriously, refusing to accept limitations. If we handle this correctly, we could create a cultural shift toward excellence rather than mediocrity. Harrison had been quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up. What about Rodriguez and Sullivan? Their disciplinary hearing is scheduled for this afternoon. Sarah's expression hardened slightly. They made their choice when they decided to sabotage a fellow service member. They need to face the consequences of that choice. But we should also use their situation as a teaching moment about the difference between destructive competition and constructive improvement. Crawford was beginning to see the outline of a plan. You're talking about turning this entire situation into a comprehensive lesson about military ethics, human potential, and professional development. I'm talking about turning a potential security crisis into the most effective recruitment and training demonstration in military history, Sarah replied. But only if we're willing to be honest about what real excellence requires. A few hours later, the base's main auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread that there would be an official response to the previous day's events, and everyone wanted to hear what would be said. The audience included not just the original 301 SEALs, but personnel from across the base, visiting officers from other commands, and even some civilian contractors who had managed to secure permission to attend. Sarah sat on the stage next to Commander Harrison and Deputy Director Crawford. Her appearance was professional but unremarkable. Standard military uniform, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a regulation style. Nothing about her physical presentation suggested the extraordinary capabilities she had demonstrated less than 24 hours earlier. Harrison stepped to the podium first, his expression serious. Yesterday's training exercise has generated significant attention both within our community and beyond. Before we address that attention, we need to deal with a serious breach of military discipline and ethics. He gestured toward the side of the auditorium, where Rodriguez and Sullivan sat with their legal representatives. Petty Officer Rodriguez and Chief Petty Officer Sullivan have been found guilty of deliberately sabotaging the equipment of a fellow service member. They attempted to cause the failure of someone who was participating in an official military exercise, putting that person at risk of injury or death. The auditorium was completely silent. Military audiences understood the seriousness of such charges. Equipment tampering wasn't just unethical, it was potentially fatal in combat situations. Both men have been reduced in rank, will forfeit 6 months' pay, and will be transferred from this command immediately. Additionally, they will be required to complete extensive retraining on military ethics and professional conduct. Harrison's voice carried the weight of command authority. Let this serve as a reminder that we do not tolerate attacks on our own people, regardless of the motivation. As Rodriguez and Sullivan were escorted from the auditorium. Sarah noticed that the crowd's reaction was one of satisfaction rather than sympathy. Military personnel understood that unit cohesion depended on absolute trust, and that trust had been violated. Crawford took the podium next, his civilian appearance creating an interesting contrast with the military setting. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to address the questions and speculation that have arisen about yesterday's demonstration. The internet is full of theories about secret programs, genetic modification, and classified technologies. I'm here to tell you the truth. He paused for effect, making eye contact with various members of the audience. The truth is that Sarah Mitchell's capabilities come from exactly what you would expect: superior training, absolute dedication, and a refusal to accept artificial limitations. There are no secret technologies involved, no genetic modifications, no classified enhancement programs. A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't what many people had expected to hear. What you witnessed yesterday was the result of training methods that are available to anyone willing to put in the work. Methods that could be implemented in any military organization by any soldier committed to excellence. Crawford's voice carried conviction. The only secret is that most people don't believe such performance is possible, so they never attempt to achieve it. Now it was Sarah's turn. She approached the podium with calm confidence, taking a moment to survey the assembled audience. These were some of the most elite soldiers in the world, and they were looking at her with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and skepticism. 3 days ago, most of you thought I didn't belong here, she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the auditorium. You made assumptions based on my appearance, my gender, and your preconceptions about what's possible. Yesterday, I proved those assumptions wrong. She paused, letting that statement sink in. But the lesson isn't about me proving I'm better than anyone else. The lesson is about what happens when we stop limiting ourselves based on other people's expectations. Sarah moved away from the podium, walking to the front of the stage where she could make more direct eye contact with the audience. Every person in this room has capabilities they haven't discovered yet, potential they haven't explored, limitations they've accepted that aren't real. She gestured toward the crowd. You are some of the most elite soldiers in the world. You've already pushed yourselves far beyond what most people think is possible. But yesterday showed you that there's another level available to anyone willing to work for it. The audience was completely engaged now. Sarah's words were challenging them to reconsider their own assumptions about human limitations. The training methods I'll be sharing over the next few weeks aren't classified or secret. They're just more demanding than most people are willing to accept. They require a level of discipline and commitment that goes beyond normal military standards. They demand that you give up excuses and face the reality of what excellence actually costs. Sarah returned to the podium, her expression becoming more serious. But before we talk about training methods, we need to address the elephant in the room. Some of you are wondering if what you saw yesterday was real, if those capabilities are actually achievable through conventional training. She smiled slightly. I understand the skepticism. What you witnessed challenged your understanding of what's humanly possible. So let me offer you a chance to verify those capabilities firsthand. The auditorium fell completely silent. Sarah was proposing something unprecedented. Any 10 volunteers from this audience can test my abilities in any way you choose. Combat, marksmanship, physical challenges, tactical scenarios, whatever you think would provide the most thorough evaluation. We'll do it right here, right now, with everyone watching. The response was immediate. Hands shot up throughout the audience as volunteers eagerly stepped forward. These were competitive, highly trained individuals who had been challenged by someone claiming capabilities beyond their experience. The opportunity to test those claims personally was irresistible. Crawford watched with a mixture of admiration and concern as Sarah essentially volunteered for the most comprehensive capability demonstration in military history. She was putting her reputation, her credibility, and potentially her safety on the line in front of hundreds of witnesses. But as Crawford observed the energy and excitement in the audience, he began to understand the brilliance of her strategy. She wasn't just demonstrating her own capabilities. She was inspiring everyone present to push beyond their own perceived limitations. She was turning a potential security crisis into the most effective motivational presentation any of them had ever witnessed. Master Chief Stone was among the first to volunteer, his expression showing professional curiosity rather than skepticism. "Ma'am, I'd like to test your situational awareness and threat assessment capabilities. We can set up a scenario with multiple variables and see how you adapt to changing conditions." Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres, one of the few other women in the audience, raised her hand. "I'd like to see a comparison of endurance capabilities, something that tests cardiovascular and muscular endurance over an extended period." Captain Michael Foster, a visiting officer from another SEAL team, stood up. "I'd like to test marksmanship under stress conditions, moving targets, limited ammunition, environmental challenges." As more volunteers stepped forward, Sarah realized she had created something unprecedented, a live demonstration of human potential that would be witnessed by some of the most qualified observers in the military. Whatever happened in the next few hours would either validate her claims completely or destroy her credibility forever. But she had no doubt about the outcome. She had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of challenge, and she knew that her capabilities were real and demonstrable. More importantly, she knew that what the audience would witness would change their understanding of what was possible for anyone willing to pay the price for excellence. The stage was set for a demonstration that would redefine how military personnel thought about human potential, training effectiveness, and the real meaning of elite performance. Sarah Mitchell was about to show them that the only real limitations were the ones they imposed on themselves. The demonstration that followed would be remembered as one of the most extraordinary displays of human capability in military history. Over the course of 4 hours, Sarah Mitchell faced every challenge that 10 of the military's most elite personnel could devise, each test designed to probe a different aspect of physical, mental, and tactical ability. Master Chief Stone's situational awareness test was conducted in a complex urban warfare simulation facility. Sarah was placed in a scenario where threats, civilians, and tactical objectives changed every 30 seconds based on intelligence updates delivered through multiple communication channels. She had to track dozens of variables simultaneously while making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. What impressed the observers wasn't just that Sarah successfully navigated the scenario, but the way she seemed to anticipate changes before they were announced. Her threat assessment was so accurate that she was already moving to counter dangers before they fully materialized. When the exercise concluded, she had achieved a perfect score while demonstrating tactical innovations that the scenario designers immediately incorporated into their training protocols. Lieutenant Commander Torres's endurance test was brutal by design. It combined cardiovascular stress with increasingly complex mental tasks, forcing participants to maintain cognitive function while their bodies were pushed to failure. Most elite soldiers could manage 20 to 30 minutes before their performance degraded significantly. Sarah completed the full 2-hour protocol with no measurable decline in either physical or mental performance. But what truly amazed the observers was that she actually seemed to improve as the test progressed. Her heart rate stabilized at levels that should have been impossible to maintain. Her cognitive responses became faster and more accurate, and her physical coordination showed enhancement rather than deterioration. By the end of the test, she was performing at levels that exceeded her starting baseline. Captain Foster's marksmanship challenge was designed to test precision under the most demanding conditions possible. Moving targets at extreme ranges, limited ammunition, environmental factors like wind and lighting changes, and time pressure that forced rapid engagement decisions. The course record had been set by a Marine sniper with over a decade of experience, and it was considered nearly impossible to beat. Sarah didn't just beat the record, she redefined what the course could measure. Her accuracy was so consistent that the scoring system had to be recalibrated. Every shot found its target with precision that bordered on the impossible. When Foster increased the difficulty by adding unexpected variables, Sarah adapted instantly, treating each new challenge as an opportunity to demonstrate another aspect of her capability. The physical challenges that followed tested strength, agility, flexibility, and coordination through increasingly complex obstacle courses. Sarah moved through each course with fluid efficiency, making difficult transitions look effortless and impossible climbs appear routine. Her movement was so precise that observers began studying her technique frame by frame, trying to understand how she achieved such perfect biomechanical efficiency. The tactical scenarios tested leadership, decision-making, and adaptability under pressure. Sarah was given command of simulated units, facing impossible odds with limited resources. Each scenario was designed to force difficult choices between competing priorities. Instead of accepting the forced choices, Sarah consistently found innovative solutions that achieved all objectives while minimizing casualties and resource expenditure. What emerged from these demonstrations wasn't just proof of exceptional individual capability, but evidence of a completely different approach to human performance. Sarah didn't just exceed normal standards. She operated according to principles that seemed to transcend conventional limitations entirely. As the final challenge concluded, the auditorium fell into a profound silence. The audience had witnessed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of human potential. These weren't party tricks or isolated displays of skill. This was comprehensive superiority across every measurable aspect of military capability. Deputy Director Crawford stepped back to the podium, his expression showing a mixture of professional pride and personal amazement. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today represents the culmination of 20 years of research into human performance optimization. Sarah Mitchell is the proof of concept for training methods that could revolutionize military effectiveness worldwide. He paused, letting the implications of that statement settle. These methods will be made available to every branch of the United States military and, through international cooperation agreements, to our allied nations. The techniques you'll learn aren't classified secrets. They're simply more demanding than conventional training protocols. Sarah returned to the podium for the final time, her appearance showing no signs of fatigue despite the grueling afternoon of demonstrations. The question you're all asking is whether what you've seen today is reproducible, whether these capabilities can be learned and developed by ordinary soldiers. The answer is yes, but with important qualifications. She looked out at the audience, making eye contact with individuals throughout the crowd. First, the training required is more intensive than anything you've experienced before. It demands not just physical effort, but psychological transformation. It's not about becoming superior to other people. It's about becoming the best possible version of yourself in order to serve others more effectively. Commander Harrison joined Sarah at the podium, his expression showing the transformation that had occurred in his thinking over the past 2 days. Effective immediately, this command will begin implementing the enhanced training protocols that produce these results. Participation will be voluntary, but I encourage every member of this unit to consider the opportunity we're being offered. He looked out at the audience of elite soldiers. What we've witnessed today proves that our understanding of human limitations has been artificially constrained. We've been accepting performance ceilings that aren't real, settling for capability levels that represent only a fraction of what's actually possible. The questions that followed revealed the profound impact Sarah's demonstration had made on professional military thinking. These weren't skeptical challenges or attempts to find flaws in her performance. Instead, they were serious inquiries about implementation, training methodology, and the broader implications for military effectiveness. Master Chief Stone was the first to speak. "Ma'am, how long does it typically take to develop these capabilities through the enhanced training protocols?" Sarah's response was characteristically honest. Individual results vary based on starting fitness levels, psychological readiness, and commitment to the process. Most participants begin seeing significant improvements within 3 months, but achieving the level you witnessed today requires 18 to 24 months of intensive training. Lieutenant Commander Torres raised her hand. "What are the failure rates? How many people attempt this training and don't complete it?" "Approximately 60% of participants complete the basic protocol," Sarah replied. "Of those, about 30% achieve advanced capability levels. The primary factor in success isn't physical ability. It's psychological resilience and willingness to push through periods of extreme discomfort." Captain Foster asked about the broader implications. "If these training methods become widely available, won't our adversaries also benefit from them?" Crawford fielded this question. "That's a risk we've considered carefully. However, our analysis indicates that the strategic benefits of having better trained allies and more professional military forces worldwide outweigh the risks of potential adversaries gaining access to these methods." Sarah added her perspective. "Moreover, excellence tends to promote excellence. Military forces that achieve higher capability levels often develop better judgment, greater discipline, and stronger ethical standards. Professional competence and moral character tend to reinforce each other. As the formal session concluded, individual conversations continued throughout the base. Small groups of SEALs gathered to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. Officers made phone calls to headquarters, describing capabilities that challenged existing doctrine. Training instructors began redesigning programs to incorporate new understanding of human potential. But the most significant conversations were happening between individual soldiers who had been inspired to reconsider their own limitations. The demonstration had planted seeds that would grow into personal transformation for many who witnessed it. Sarah found herself surrounded by people wanting to learn more about the training methods, the mindset required for excellence, and the practical steps needed to begin the transformation process. Her responses were detailed and encouraging, but she consistently emphasized that information alone wasn't sufficient. Understanding the principles is just the first step, she told a group of eager young SEALs. Real change requires consistent application of those principles even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Excellence isn't achieved through sporadic effort. It's built through daily choices to push beyond what feels easy or convenient. As the evening approached, Sarah received a message that had been forwarded through multiple layers of military communication. It was from the Secretary of Defense himself, requesting a personal briefing on the training protocols and their potential for military-wide implementation. But, more importantly to Sarah, she received dozens of messages from individual soldiers who had been inspired by the demonstration to begin their own journey toward excellence. These messages came from personnel throughout the military, from different branches, ranks, and specializations, all united by a newfound belief that they could achieve more than they had previously thought possible. The sabotage attempt that had started this entire sequence of events seemed almost trivial now in comparison to what had been accomplished. Rodriguez and Sullivan had thought they could intimidate one person into quitting. Instead, they had inadvertently triggered a demonstration that would inspire thousands of military personnel to push beyond their perceived limitations. 3 days after the auditorium demonstration, Sarah stood once again on the training ground where everything had begun. But now the area was filled with volunteers participating in the first implementation of the enhanced training protocols. The enthusiasm and dedication she observed validated her belief that most people were capable of far more than they had ever attempted. Commander Harrison approached, his expression showing the quiet satisfaction of someone who had witnessed his unit evolve beyond his expectations. "Mitchell, I wanted to thank you for what you've done here. Not just the demonstration, but the way you've handled everything from the sabotage attempt to the media attention." Sarah nodded acknowledgement. "Thank you, sir. But what happened here wasn't about me proving anything. It was about proving what's possible when we refuse to accept artificial limitations." Harrison smiled. "I think you've proven that choosing the wrong woman to mess with can have consequences far beyond what anyone expected." As Sarah watched the training session continue, she reflected on the events of the past week. A simple attempt at intimidation had transformed into a comprehensive demonstration of human potential. Sabotage had backfired into inspiration. What was meant to force one person out had instead elevated everyone involved. The wrong woman had indeed been chosen. But the consequences had been exactly what the military needed. A reminder that excellence was possible, that limitations were often self-imposed, and that the right kind of pressure could transform individuals and organizations in ways that seemed impossible until they happened. The ripple effects would continue to spread throughout the military community and beyond. Training programs would be redesigned, performance standards would be elevated, and thousands of individuals would begin their own journey toward capabilities they had never imagined possible. Sarah Mitchell had taken down her opponents in seconds, just as the title suggested. But she had also built up everyone who witnessed it, creating something far more valuable than personal victory. She had created a movement toward excellence that would benefit everyone willing to embrace the challenge. The demonstration was over, but the real work was just beginning, and Sarah knew that the best was yet to come.